a debt of the past. Born to a commoner but raised in a noble's castle, Lady Emmeline of Highgate had never belonged to either world. But when Sir Tristan de Vere discovered her true lineage, everything changed. He caught her wrist, his voice low. "You are not who they say you are," he murmured. "And it is time the world knows it." Chapter 1. The Whispers of Highgate. The wind, a restless spirit, howled around the ancient stones of Highgate Castle, carrying with it the scent of pine and the distant, mournful cry of a hawk. Emmeline, perched on the weathered battlements, felt the chill seep into her bones, a familiar companion in this place of echoing silences and half-told truths. She wrapped her woolen shawl tighter, her gaze lost in the swirling mists that veiled the valley below. Highgate, her home, her prison, her sanctuary. It had always been a place of contradictions, much like her own existence. She was called Lady Emmeline, yet the title felt like a borrowed gown, beautiful but ill-fitting. The servants whispered behind cupped hands, their words like the rustle of dry leaves. Falconer's daughter, raised among nobles, neither one nor the other. She knew the truth of it. Her father, Thomas, the castle's falconer, had been a man of quiet strength and keen eyes, a man who understood the language of birds better than the intricacies of courtly life. Her mother a ghost, a whisper in the wind, a name never spoken aloud within Highgate's walls. Lady Annalise, they said, a noblewoman who had died in childbirth. But Emmeline had seen the pitying glances, the hushed conversations that ceased abruptly when she entered a room. She knew, somehow, that her mother's story was more than a simple tragedy. The castle itself mirrored her fragmented identity. Grand, imposing, yet filled with hidden passages and forgotten chambers. The great hall, with its soaring arches and enormous fireplace, was where Lord Beaumont, her guardian, held court, dispensing justice and hosting lavish feasts. But Emmeline preferred the quiet solitude of the Falcon Mews, the scent of leather and feathers, the sharp, intelligent gaze of the birds. There, she felt a connection to her father, a sense of belonging that eluded her elsewhere. Today, however, even the Mews offered little solace. Lord Beaumont had summoned her, an unusual occurrence that sent a tremor of unease through her. He was a man of stern countenance and unwavering loyalty to the crown, a man who valued duty above all else. He had provided for her, educated her, treated her with a distant courtesy, but there was always a wall between them, an unspoken acknowledgment of her ambiguous status. As she made her way down the winding stone staircase, the torchlight flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The air was heavy with the scent of beeswax and wood smoke, a familiar aroma that usually calmed her, but today it felt oppressive, suffocating. She passed the tapestry hall, where richly woven scenes depicted the glories of the Beaumont lineage, battles won, alliances forged, a history she could never fully claim. She reached the Lord Solar, a room dominated by a massive oak desk and a roaring fire. Lord Beaumont stood by the window, his back to her, his silhouette a dark outline against the gray light. He turned as she entered, his face etched with lines of worry. "Emmeline," he said, his voice devoid of its usual formality.
"Seat."
She obeyed, her heart pounding against her ribs. He gestured to a chair opposite him, the firelight reflecting in his steely gray eyes. "There are delicate matters that must be discussed," he began, his voice heavy with unspoken implications. "Matters concerning your parentage." Emmeline felt a cold dread grip her. The whispers, the half-truths, the carefully guarded secrets, they were about to be revealed. She braced herself, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. "I have received a communication," Lord Beaumont continued, picking up a sealed parchment from the desk. "From a knight, Sir Tristan de Vere." The name was unfamiliar, yet it resonated with a strange power. She had never heard of this knight, but the way Lord Beaumont spoke his name sent a shiver of premonition down her spine. He claims to have knowledge of your mother's true fate." The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Emmeline stared at Lord Beaumont, her mind reeling. Her mother's true fate? What secrets had Highgate kept hidden all these years? Lord Beaumont broke the seal on the parchment, his hands trembling slightly. He scanned the contents, his expression growing grimmer with each passing moment. He claims that your mother was not Lady Annalise, he said, his voice barely a whisper. He claims she was a Lara, a woman of common birth, he hesitated, struggling to find the right word. A woman accused of treason. The word hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Treason. The accusation was a death sentence, a stain that would forever taint her name, her very existence. Emmeline felt a wave of nausea wash over her. Her mother, a traitor? It was impossible, unthinkable. He is coming to Highgate, Lord Beaumont continued, his voice regaining some of its strength. He seeks an audience. He claims to have proof. Emmeline's mind was a whirlwind of emotions: fear, confusion, a flicker of defiant hope. If her mother was not Lady Annalise, then who was she? And what did this Sir Tristan de Vere want? I do not understand, she stammered, her voice trembling. Why would he come here? After all these years? Lord Beaumont sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. He claims it is a matter of honor, of righting a past wrong. He says he owes a debt to your mother. A debt? To a woman accused of treason. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, fragmented, making no sense. Emmeline felt a growing sense of desperation, a need to understand the truth, no matter how painful it might be. When will he arrive? She asked, her voice barely audible. Lord Beaumont looked at her, his gaze softening slightly. He is expected tomorrow. Tomorrow. The word echoed in her mind, a promise of revelation, of upheaval, of a future she could not yet comprehend. The whispers of Highgate had always been a part of her life, but now they were about to become a roar, a storm that would sweep away the carefully constructed facade of her existence. And at the center of that storm stood a knight, a stranger, a man who held the key to her past, and perhaps her future. Chapter 2. A Falcon's Flight, a Maiden's Dream. The dawn arrived, painting the sky in hues of pale rose and lavender, a fragile beauty that belied the turmoil within Highgate's walls. Emmeline had spent a restless night, sleep eluding her as fragments of memory and speculation danced in her mind. She rose before the sun, drawn to the familiar comfort of the Falcon Mews. The air was crisp and cold, carrying the scent of dew-kissed grass and the sharp, musky odor of the birds. Her father's favorite falcon, a magnificent gerfalcon named Shadow, greeted her with a piercing cry, its intelligent eyes fixed on her face. She reached out a gloved hand, and the bird hopped onto her wrist, its talons gripping the leather with surprising gentleness. "Oh, Shadow," she murmured, stroking the bird's sleek feathers. "What secrets do you see from your lofty perch? What truths are hidden beneath the clouds?" The falcon tilted its head, as if listening, then let out another cry, a wild, untamed sound that echoed across the courtyard. Emmeline felt a strange connection to the bird, a shared sense of freedom, of yearning for something beyond the confines of her present life. She released Shadow into the sky, watching as it soared upwards, a dark speck against the brightening heavens. The sight filled her with a bittersweet longing, a desire to escape the weight of her uncertain future, to fly away and never look back. But she knew she could not. She had to face whatever truths awaited her, had to confront the knight who claimed to know her mother's secrets. She had to find her own place in this world, a place that was neither wholly noble nor wholly common, but uniquely her own. Returning to her chambers, she found a simple gown of gray wool laid out for her, a stark contrast to the richly embroidered silks she usually wore for formal occasions. Lord Beaumont's subtle message was clear. Today, she was not Lady Emmeline, but simply a young woman facing an uncertain destiny. She dressed slowly, her hands trembling slightly. She brushed her long, dark hair, the color of raven's wings, a trait she shared with her father. Her eyes, a deep shade of green, reflected a mixture of fear and determination. She was no longer the sheltered girl who had spent her days dreaming among the falcons. She was a woman on the verge of discovering her true identity, a woman who would not be silenced by whispers or intimidated by threats. As she descended the stairs, she heard the sound of horses' hooves in the courtyard, the clang of armor, the murmur of voices. Sir Tristan de Vere had arrived. She paused at the entrance to the great hall, her heart pounding in her chest. The scene before her was a tableau of medieval power and pageantry. Lord Beaumont stood at the head of the hall, his face impassive, flanked by his men-at-arms. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the crackling of the fire in the enormous hearth. And then she saw him. Sir Tristan de Vere stood apart from the others, his presence commanding attention. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build, his movements conveying a sense of controlled strength. He wore a suit of finely crafted armor, the steel gleaming in the torchlight, but it was his face that captured her attention. It was a face etched with the lines of experience, of battles fought and hardships endured. His eyes, a striking shade of emerald green, met hers across the hall, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade away. There was a strange intensity in his gaze, a mixture of scrutiny and something else. Recognition? Pity? Emmeline couldn't decipher it, but it sent a shiver down her spine. Lord Beaumont stepped forward, his voice breaking the spell. Sir Tristan, he said, his tone formal and reserved. You have requested an audience. State your purpose. Sir Tristan bowed slightly, his movements graceful despite the weight of his armor. My Lord Beaumont, he said, his voice deep and resonant. I come to you with a tale of injustice, of a wrong that has been hidden for too long. A tale that concerns the parentage of this young woman. He gestured towards Emmeline, and all eyes in the hall turned to her. She felt a blush rise to her cheeks, but she met his gaze unflinchingly. I speak of Alara, Sir Tristan continued, his voice unwavering. A woman wrongly accused, a woman whose memory has been unjustly tarnished. The name echoed in the hall, a ghost brought back to life. Alara, Emmeline's mother. I was but a squire then, Sir Tristan said, his voice taking on a softer tone, a hint of sadness creeping in. Serving under Lord Alaric, your predecessor, my Lord Beaumont. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the faces, the guards, before settling back on Emmeline. Lord Alaric and Alara were close. A collective gasp arose from the gathered crowd. This closeness, in the rigid social construct of their world, meant only one thing, an affair. Alara was no traitor, Sir Tristan stated firmly, meeting Lord Beaumont's now hardened gaze. She was framed by those who sought to exploit Lord Alaric's affection for her, by those who feared his growing power and influence. Emmeline felt a surge of hope, a fragile belief that the whispers she had heard all her life were lies. But the accusations, the treason, it was a heavy cloud to dispel. Sir Tristan reached into a pouch at his belt and produced a small, intricately carved wooden box. I have proof, he said, his voice filled with a quiet conviction. Proof of Alara's innocence, and proof of this young woman's true lineage. He stepped towards Emmeline, his emerald eyes holding hers captive. He opened the box, revealing a single object nestled within, a silver locket, shaped like a falcon in flight. Emmeline gasped. She knew that locket. She had seen it before, in a dream, a recurring vision that had haunted her since childhood. A dream of a beautiful woman, with eyes the color of the forest, placing the locket around her neck, whispering words of love and protection. The room was silent, every eye fixed on the locket, on Emmeline, on the knight who had shattered the carefully constructed world of Highgate with a single, whispered name. The falcon had flown, and the maiden's dream was about to become reality. Chapter 3. The Knight of the Emerald Crest. The silver falcon glinted in the dim light of the great hall, a tiny beacon of hope in a sea of uncertainty. Emmeline felt a tremor run through her as Sir Tristan held the locket aloft, its delicate chains swaying gently. It was more than just a piece of jewelry, it was a tangible link to the mother she had never known, a symbol of a past that was suddenly, shockingly, within reach. This locket, Sir Tristan said, his voice resonating with quiet authority, was given to Alara by Lord Alaric himself. It bears his crest, concealed within the falcon's wings. He carefully opened the locket, revealing a tiny, intricately engraved crest, a lion rampant, holding a sword. The Beaumont crest, but subtly different, a detail that only those intimately familiar with the family's heraldry would recognize. Lord Beaumont stepped forward, his face a mask of disbelief. He took the locket from Sir Tristan, his fingers trembling slightly. He examined it closely, his eyes narrowed in concentration. The silence in the hall was palpable, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the distant sound of a raven's caw. Emmeline watched him, her heart pounding in her chest. She saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes, the subtle shift in his expression, from disbelief to a dawning comprehension. He knew the locket was genuine, that Sir Tristan's claims were not mere fabrications. This changes everything, Lord Beaumont said, his voice hoarse. He looked at Emmeline, his gaze filled with a mixture of confusion and something akin to regret. It confirms what I have long suspected, Sir Tristan said, his voice gentle but firm. That Alara was not a traitor, but a victim, and that this young woman is not merely the falconer's daughter, but the rightful heir to Highgate. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Heir to Highgate. The concept was both exhilarating and terrifying. It meant a complete upheaval of her life, a shift in power dynamics, a challenge to the established order. Emmeline felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She had spent her life on the fringes of nobility, always aware of her ambiguous status. Now, she was being thrust into the center of it all, declared the rightful heir to the very castle that had been both her home and her prison. The murmurs in the hall grew louder, the whispers turning into a buzz of speculation and disbelief. The men at arms shifted uneasily, their hands resting on their swords. The implications of Sir Tristan's revelation were clear, a challenge to Lord Beaumont's authority, a potential power struggle, a threat to the stability of the realm. Sir Tristan, however, remained calm, his emerald eyes fixed on Emmeline. He saw the fear, the confusion, the flicker of hope in her gaze. He knew that he had thrown her life into chaos, but he believed he had done the right thing. He had a debt to repay, an oath to fulfill. I understand this is a shock, he said, his voice softening as he addressed Emmeline directly. But I assure you, I am here to help, to guide you, to protect you. His words offered a small measure of comfort, a lifeline in the turbulent sea of emotions that threatened to engulf her. But she couldn't help but wonder about his motives. Why was he doing this? What was his connection to her mother? Why? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Why are you doing this, Sir Tristan? What is your interest in all of this? He met her gaze, his expression unwavering. My father, Sir Gareth de Vere, was a close friend and confidant of Lord Alaric, he explained. He was present when the accusations against Alara were made. He always believed in her innocence, but he was powerless to prevent what happened. He paused, his voice taking on a deeper tone, a hint of pain creeping in. He made me swear, on his deathbed, that I would find the truth, that I would clear Alara's name and restore her rightful heir to her inheritance. This is not merely a matter of justice. Lady Emmeline, it is a matter of honor. A debt passed down from father to son. His words resonated with sincerity, with a deep-seated conviction that was hard to dismiss. She saw the weight of that oath in his eyes, the burden of responsibility he carried. He was not merely a knight seeking glory or power, he was a man driven by a sense of duty, by a need to right a past wrong. But the accusations, Emmeline said, her voice still hesitant. The treason, how can you be so sure of her innocence? Sir Tristan reached into his pouch again and produced a rolled-up parchment, tied with a silken cord. This, he said, is a letter written by Alara herself, shortly before her disappearance. It was entrusted to my father, with instructions to deliver it to Lord Alaric. But my father was prevented from doing so. He handed the parchment to Emmeline. She took it, her fingers brushing against his. A spark of warmth, a fleeting connection, passed between them. She unrolled the parchment, her eyes scanning the faded ink. It was written in a delicate, feminine hand, the words filled with a mixture of love, fear, and desperation. The letter spoke of a plot, a conspiracy to frame Alara and remove Lord Alaric from power. It named names, powerful nobles who had grown jealous of Alaric's influence and sought to replace him with a more pliable ruler. It spoke of Alara's love for Alaric, her unwavering belief in his innocence, her fear for their unborn child. Emmeline's heart ached as she read the words, a poignant echo of a love story cut short by betrayal and deceit. Her mother's voice, silent for so long, now spoke to her from across the years, revealing a truth that had been buried beneath layers of lies and whispers. As she finished reading, tears welled up in her eyes. She looked up at Sir Tristan, her gaze filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. She was innocent, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Sir Tristan nodded, his emerald eyes filled with a quiet compassion. She was, he said, and now the world will know it. The Knight of the Emerald Crest, the bearer of secrets, the champion of a forgotten woman, had arrived. And with his arrival, the foundations of Highgate and Emmeline's life were irrevocably shaken. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Tapestry Hall. The revelation of Alara's letter sent ripples of shock and disbelief through the assembled company. Lord Beaumont, visibly shaken, ordered a private council, summoning only his closest advisors and, surprisingly, including Emmeline and Sir Tristan. The great hall emptied, leaving behind an echoing silence that felt heavier than the previous murmurs. Emmeline followed the group, her mind still reeling. The weight of the locket, now nestled against her skin beneath her gown, felt both comforting and incredibly heavy. It was a physical reminder of her mother, of her true heritage, and of the immense responsibility that had suddenly fallen upon her shoulders. They gathered in the Tapestry Hall, a long, narrow room lined with richly woven depictions of Beaumont ancestors and their historical triumphs. The flickering torchlight cast dancing shadows on the figures, making them seem to move and whisper, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. Lord Beaumont took his place at the head of a long, oak table, his face grim. Sir Tristan stood opposite him, his posture confident and unwavering. Emmeline was seated to Lord Beaumont's right, a position that felt both precarious and strangely empowering. Sir Tristan, Lord Beaumont began, his voice tight with controlled anger, your claims are extraordinary. You accuse men of high standing, men whose loyalty to the crown has never been questioned. The truth does not bow to titles or a lineage, my lord, Sir Tristan replied, his voice calm but firm. The letter speaks for itself. Alara was framed, and those responsible must be brought to justice. One of Lord Beaumont's advisors, a portly man named Sir Reginald, scoffed. A letter? Written by a woman accused of treason? Hardly conclusive evidence, Sir Knight. It is not the only evidence, Sir Tristan countered. There are others, witnesses who were silenced, documents that were misplaced. I have spent years gathering information, piecing together the truth. And why should we believe you? Another advisor, a sharp-featured woman named Lady Isolde, asked, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. You are a stranger to Highgate, a knight with no known ties to this region. My ties are to the truth, Lady Isolde, Sir Tristan said, his gaze unwavering, and to the memory of Alara, a woman unjustly wronged. My father swore an oath, and I intend to fulfill it. Emmeline watched the exchange, her mind racing. She saw the skepticism in the advisors' faces, the ingrained loyalty to the established order, the fear of challenging powerful figures. But she also saw something else in Sir Tristan's eyes, a fierce determination, an unwavering belief in his cause. The letter names Lord Elmsworth, Lord Beaumont said, his voice heavy with disbelief, and Lord Ashford, two of the most powerful men in the realm. They were the architects of the plot, Sir Tristan confirmed. They saw Lord Alaric as a threat, a man who could not be controlled. They used Alara as a pawn, a means to achieve their own ambitions. This is treason, Sir Reginald exclaimed, his face flushed with anger. To accuse such men, it is unthinkable. The truth is often unthinkable, Sir Reginald, Sir Tristan said, his voice laced with irony. But it must be faced nonetheless. Emmeline, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. My mother, she wrote of her love for Lord Alaric, she said, her voice trembling slightly. She wrote of their child. All eyes turned to her. The weight of their gaze was almost unbearable, but she met it with a newfound strength. I am that child, she said, her voice gaining confidence. I am the living proof of their love, of their innocence. I will not let my mother's memory be stained by lies. I will not let those who wronged her escape justice. Her words hung in the air, a declaration of intent, a challenge to the established order. The shadows in the tapestry hall seemed to deepen, the figures on the walls seeming to watch her with silent judgment. Lord Beaumont looked at her, his expression unreadable. He had raised her, protected her, kept her in ignorance of her true heritage. Now he was faced with a choice, to cling to the old lies or to embrace the truth, no matter how disruptive it might be. We must proceed with caution, he said finally, his voice measured. These are grave accusations. We cannot act without further proof. I have more proof, Sir Tristan said, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. I have witnesses who are willing to testify, documents that will corroborate Alara's letter. But they are scattered. It will take time to gather them. Time is a luxury we may not have, Lord Beaumont said, his gaze darkening. If Lord Elmsworth and Lord Ashford learn of these accusations, they will not hesitate to act. They will silence us, by any means necessary. The threat hung in the air, a palpable danger. Emmeline felt a chill run down her spine. She had stepped into a world of courtly intrigue, of hidden betrayals, of power struggles that could cost her her life. Sir Tristan, however, seemed unfazed. Then we must be prepared to defend ourselves, he said, his voice resolute. We must gather our allies, strengthen our defenses, and prepare for the storm that is to come. His words were a call to arms, a declaration of war against the shadows that had haunted Highgate for too long. And as Emmeline looked at him, at the Knight of the Emerald Crest, she knew that she was no longer alone. She had an ally, a protector, a champion who would stand by her side, no matter the cost. The shadows in the tapestry hall might be deep, but the light of truth, carried by a knight and a falcon's daughter, was beginning to pierce through. Chapter 5. The Price of a Secret Kept. The weight of the impending conflict settled heavily upon Highgate. The council dispersed, each member grappling with the implications of Sir Tristan's revelations. Lord Beaumont, torn between his loyalty to the crown and the undeniable truth of Emmeline's lineage, retreated into a brooding silence, his usual stoicism replaced by a palpable unease. Emmeline, left to her own devices, found herself wandering the castle's familiar corridors, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The locket, now a constant presence against her skin, felt like a talisman, a reminder of her mother's love and a source of unexpected strength. She found herself drawn to the falcon mews, the scent of leather and feathers a comforting balm to her frayed nerves. Shadow, her father's gerfalcon, greeted her with a piercing cry, its intelligent eyes seeming to reflect her own turmoil. As she stroked the bird's sleek feathers, she noticed a figure standing in the shadows of the mews. It was Sir Tristan, his armor removed, revealing a simple tunic and breeches. He was leaning against a wooden post, his gaze fixed on the distant hills, his expression thoughtful and somber. Sir Tristan, she said, her voice soft in the quiet of the mews. He turned, his emerald eyes meeting hers. He offered a small, almost hesitant smile. Lady Emmeline, he replied, his voice losing some of its formal edge. I trust you are coping with the day's events. Coping is a generous word, she admitted, a wry smile touching her lips. I feel as though I have been swept up in a storm, with no clear path in sight. A storm indeed, he agreed, his gaze returning to the distant hills. But storms pass, Lady Emmeline, and often they leave behind a clearer sky. I hope you are right, she said, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "But I fear what this storm may bring. Lord Elmsworth and Lord Ashford, they are powerful men. They will not take kindly to these accusations." "They will not," he agreed, his voice hardening. "But they are not invincible. We will fight them, Lady Emmeline. Together." The word together resonated with her, a promise of alliance, of shared purpose. She looked at him, at the knight who had so unexpectedly entered her life, and felt a flicker of trust, a sense of connection that transcended the circumstances that had brought them together. "My father," she began, then hesitated, unsure how to voice her concerns. He knew nothing of this, did he? Of my true mother?" Sir Tristan shook his head. "No, Lady Emmeline. Lord Beaumont kept the secret well. Your father, Thomas, believed you to be the daughter of Lady Annalise. He loved you dearly, as his own." Relief washed over her. She had always felt a deep bond with her father, a connection that transcended the whispers and the uncertainties of her birth. To know that his love had been genuine, untainted by the secrets of her past, was a profound comfort. He died a few years ago," she said, her voice catching in her throat. "A hunting accident, they said." Sir Tristan's expression darkened. "I am sorry, Lady Emmeline. I know how much he meant to you." "He taught me everything I know about falcons," she said, her gaze drifting to Shadow, who was perched on her wrist. "He taught me patience, observation, the importance of understanding the language of the wild." "Valuable lessons," Sir Tristan said, his eyes softening. "Lessons that will serve you well in the days to come." He paused, then looked at her directly, his gaze intense. "Lady Emmeline," he said, his voice low and earnest, "I know I have thrown your life into turmoil. I know I have asked much of you, a stranger, with little more than a letter and a locket to prove my claims. But I swear to you on my honor that I will not abandon you. I will stand by your side, and together, we will uncover the truth and see justice done." His words, spoken with such conviction, sent a shiver down her spine. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the unwavering commitment to his oath. She was no longer alone, facing the shadows of Highgate. She had an ally, a protector, a knight who had pledged his loyalty to her cause. "Thank you, Sir Tristan," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. I believe you." A small smile touched his lips. "Then let us prepare, Lady Emmeline," he said. "For the storm is gathering, and we must be ready to face it." He was staring out at the hills, his eyes narrowed. "Lord Beaumont keeps a small force here," he commented, "but loyal. We will need more. I have sent word to my own holding. My men are seasoned." "And what of Lord Beaumont? He seems conflicted," Emmeline asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tristan turned, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was doubt in those clear green eyes. "He is an honorable man, but his loyalty to the crown he trailed off. The price of keeping this secret has clearly weighed heavily on him. Which loyalty will win out? I do not know." He looked at her then, the intensity returning, any hint of doubt vanishing. "But whatever he chooses, you have me, and I will not let you fall." The air shifted, the scent of the coming rain, a new kind of weight in the heavy silence. Emmeline felt it, that undeniable pull, a connection neither of them could explain, growing stronger in the confined, secret space of the Falcon Mews. The storm was coming, and the price of a secret kept was about to be paid. Chapter 6. Beneath a storm-racked sky. The storm broke that night, mirroring the tempest brewing within Highgate's walls. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled like a tormented spirit, rattling the ancient stones. Emmeline, unable to sleep, stood by her window, watching the lightning illuminate the turbulent sky. Each flash revealed the landscape in stark, fleeting detail. The windswept hills, the dark, swirling clouds, the rain-soaked courtyard below. She felt a strange sense of foreboding, a premonition of impending danger. The secrets of Highgate were unraveling, and the consequences were becoming increasingly clear. Lord Elmsworth and Lord Ashford would not stand idly by while their reputations were tarnished and their power threatened. They would strike back, and Highgate, with its small garrison and divided loyalties, was vulnerable. A knock on her door startled her. She turned, her heart pounding, to see Sir Tristan standing in the doorway, his face grim. He was clad in his armor, the steel gleaming in the dim light of her chamber. "Lady Emmeline," he said, his voice urgent. "We have received word. Lord Elmsworth's forces are approaching." The news hit her like a physical blow. The storm had arrived, sooner than expected. She felt a surge of fear, but beneath it, a steely resolve began to form. She would not cower. She would not let fear paralyze her. She would fight for her birthright, for her mother's memory, for the truth. "How long do we have?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady. "Hours, perhaps less," Sir Tristan replied. "They are moving swiftly, under cover of the storm." "Lord Beaumont?" "He is rallying his men," Sir Tristan said. "But I do not know where his true loyalties lie. He has yet to declare his support for you, publicly." The uncertainty of Lord Beaumont's allegiance was a heavy weight, a constant source of anxiety. But Emmeline knew she could not rely on him. She had to rely on herself, on Sir Tristan, and on the small band of loyal followers who had begun to gather around her. "We must prepare," she said, her voice firm. "We must make Highgate as defensible as possible." Sir Tristan nodded. "I have already given orders to strengthen the gates, reinforce the walls, and prepare for a siege. But we are outnumbered, Lady Emmeline. Greatly outnumbered." "Then we must use our wits," she said, her mind racing. "We must find a way to even the odds." She thought of the castle's layout, its hidden passages, its forgotten chambers. She knew Highgate like the back of her hand, every nook and cranny, every secret pathway. "There are other ways," she said, her voice thoughtful. "Ways to move unseen, to surprise the enemy, to disrupt their plans." Sir Tristan looked at her, his emerald eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and respect.
"Tell me," he said.
She explained her knowledge of the castle's hidden passages, the secret tunnels that led to the outside world, the forgotten armories where ancient weapons were stored. She spoke of the Falcon Mews, and an idea began to form in her mind, a daring plan that could give them a fighting chance. Sir Tristan listened intently, his initial skepticism giving way to a growing admiration for her resourcefulness, her courage, her intimate knowledge of Highgate. He saw in her not just a noble woman, but a strategist, a leader, a woman capable of fighting for her own destiny. "It is a risky plan, Lady Emmeline," he said, when she had finished. "But it might just work. It could give us the advantage we need. We have little to lose," she said, her voice resolute, "and everything to gain." They spent the remaining hours before dawn preparing, working together with a seamless understanding that surprised them both. Emmeline, guided by her intimate knowledge of Highgate, directed the placement of defenses, the positioning of archers, the preparation of traps. Sir Tristan, with his military experience, organized the men-at-arms, trained them in specific tactics, and instilled in them a sense of purpose and determination. As the first rays of dawn pierced through the storm clouds, painting the sky in hues of gray and purple, Highgate was as ready as it could be. The defenders were in position, their faces grim but resolute. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the distant rumble of thunder and the approaching hoofbeats of Lord Elmsworth's army. Emmeline stood on the battlements, beside Sir Tristan, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The storm had subsided, but the sky was still overcast, a fitting backdrop for the battle to come. She felt a surge of adrenaline, a mixture of fear and excitement. She was no longer the sheltered girl who had dreamed of falcons and freedom. She was a warrior, a leader, a woman fighting for her birthright. And as she looked at Sir Tristan, at the knight who had stood by her side, who had believed in her when no one else had, she felt a sense of gratitude, of loyalty, of a growing bond that transcended the circumstances that had brought them together. The storm-racked sky above them was a reflection of their own turbulent journey, a journey that had just begun. And whatever the outcome, she knew that she would face it, not alone, but with the Knight of the Emerald Crest by her side. The air itself was charged. He turned to her, his eyes searching. "Are you afraid?" he asked, his voice low. Emmeline looked out to the advancing army and met his question with strength she didn't know she possessed. "Yes," she answered honestly, meeting his gaze. "But I will not yield." A flicker of something warm admiration, respect lit his features. He gave a single nod.
"Nor will I."
And in that single moment, beneath the sky-promising battle, a bond stronger than any oath was forged. Chapter 7. The Serpent in the Garden. The initial assault was brutal. Lord Elmsworth's forces, far outnumbering Highgate's defenders, attacked with a ferocity fueled by their lord's ambition and the cover of the lingering storm. Battering rams slammed against the main gate, arrows rained down upon the battlements, and the air filled with the clang of steel and the cries of the wounded. Emmeline, stationed with Sir Tristan on the highest tower, watched the battle unfold with a mixture of dread and determination. She had never witnessed such violence before. The raw, visceral reality of warfare a stark contrast to the romanticized tales she had read in books. Sir Tristan, a seasoned warrior, directed the defense with calm efficiency, his voice cutting through the chaos, issuing orders, rallying the men, encouraging them to hold their ground. He fought with a skill and courage that inspired those around him, his emerald-crested beacon of hope amidst the carnage. Emmeline, though not a trained fighter, played her part. She used her knowledge of the castle to guide messengers through hidden passages, relaying information, bringing supplies to the defenders, and tending to the wounded. She moved with a quiet grace and determination, her presence a calming influence in the midst of the storm. As the day wore on, the battle reached a stalemate. Highgate's defenses, though strained, held firm. Lord Elmsworth's forces, despite their superior numbers, were unable to breach the walls. The hidden passages and traps that Emmeline had devised proved surprisingly effective, disrupting the enemy's advance and sowing confusion in their ranks. But the defenders were tiring. They had been fighting for hours, without respite, and their numbers were dwindling. Emmeline saw the exhaustion in their faces, the desperation in their eyes. She knew they could not hold out much longer. It was then that she saw him. A figure, clad in the colors of Highgate, moving stealthily through the courtyard, heading towards the main gate. It was Sir Reginald, Lord Beaumont's advisor, the man who had scoffed at Alara's letter and questioned Sir Tristan's motives. Emmeline's heart sank. She realized, with a sickening certainty, what he was doing. He was betraying them. He was opening the gate for Lord Elmsworth's forces. "Sir Tristan," she cried, pointing towards Sir Reginald. "He's opening the gate." Sir Tristan turned, his eyes following her gaze. He saw Sir Reginald reach the gate, his hands fumbling with the heavy bolts. "Traitor!" Sir Tristan roared, his voice filled with fury. He reacted instantly, leaping down the stairs, his sword drawn. But it was too late. Sir Reginald had managed to unbolt the gate, and Lord Elmsworth's soldiers were pouring into the courtyard. The battle took a sudden, devastating turn. The defenders, caught off guard, were overwhelmed by the sudden influx of enemy soldiers. The courtyard became a scene of chaos and carnage, the tide of the battle turning decisively in Lord Elmsworth's favor. Emmeline watched in horror as Highgate's defenders were cut down, their valiant resistance crumbling under the weight of the betrayal. She felt a surge of despair, a sense of helplessness. All her efforts, all her hopes, seemed to be collapsing around her. But she refused to give up. She had come too far, fought too hard, to surrender now. She had to find a way to rally the remaining defenders, to turn the tide of the battle, to salvage something from the wreckage. She saw Lord Beaumont, fighting desperately in the midst of the chaos, his face grim, his sword stained with blood. He was surrounded by enemy soldiers, his situation looking increasingly precarious. Emmeline knew she had to reach him. He was still the Lord of Highgate, and his leadership was crucial to their survival. But the courtyard was a maelstrom of fighting, a deadly gauntlet that she had little chance of crossing unscathed. It was then that she remembered the Falcon Muse. The secret passage that led from the mews to the stables, a passage that could bypass the fighting in the courtyard and bring her closer to Lord Beaumont. Without hesitation, she turned and ran, heading towards the mews, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to reach Lord Beaumont. She had to rally the remaining defenders. She had to save Highgate. The serpent had struck, but the falcon still had one last flight to make. The betrayal was a bitter sting, but there was a flicker. The battle wasn't over. And as she ran, she saw Tristan, cutting down enemies, trying to reach the gate, trying to close the breach. He was buying them time. And Emmeline knew she couldn't waste it. Chapter 8. Echoes of a Forgotten Past. The Falcon Mews were eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos raging outside. The birds, disturbed by the sounds of battle, fluttered restlessly in their cages, their cries echoing in the dimly lit space. Emmeline paused for a moment, catching her breath, her hand resting on Shadow's cage. "Fly, Shadow," she whispered, her voice filled with a desperate plea. "Fly and bring us luck." She opened the cage, and the gerfalcon soared into the air, disappearing through a gap in the roof. Emmeline watched it go, a flicker of hope rekindling in her heart. She found the entrance to the secret passage, hidden behind a stack of hay bales. It was a narrow, dark tunnel, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. She hesitated for a moment, her fear battling with her determination. But the image of Lord Beaumont, fighting desperately against overwhelming odds, spurred her onward. She entered the passage, the darkness closing in around her. The air was damp and musty, the silence broken only by the sound of her own breathing and the distant echoes of battle. She moved slowly, carefully, feeling her way along the rough stone walls. As she progressed deeper into the tunnel, she began to hear other sounds. Whispers, murmurs, voices that seemed to come from the walls themselves. She paused, straining to listen. The voices were faint, indistinct, but she could make out a few words. Alara Alaric betrayal justice, the names resonated with her, echoing the story that Sir Tristan had told, the story of her mother, her father, the conspiracy that had brought them down. It was as if the walls of Highgate were whispering their secrets, revealing the hidden truths of the past. She realized, with a growing sense of awe, that she was walking through a passage that had been used by her parents, a passage that had witnessed their love, their fear, their desperate attempts to escape their enemies. She felt a strange connection to them, a sense of kinship that transcended time and death. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. She could almost see them, her parents, fleeing through this very tunnel, pursued by their enemies, their love a fragile flame in the darkness. She could feel their fear, their desperation, their unwavering belief in each other. The experience was both terrifying and empowering. He fought with renewed vigor, his sword a blur of motion, cutting down his attackers. The tide of the battle, which had seemed so decisively lost, began to shift once more. The Highgate defenders, inspired by Emmeline's courage and Lord Beaumont's renewed leadership, fought with a ferocity that surprised even themselves. The echoes of a forgotten past, the whispers of Alara and Alaric, seemed to fuel their fight, giving them strength beyond their numbers. The battle was far from over, but hope, like a falcon released into the storm, had taken flight. Chapter 9. A Dance of Deception and Desire. The arrival of Emmeline and the resurgence of the Highgate defenders momentarily stalled Lord Elmsworth's assault. The fighting in the courtyard remained fierce, a chaotic melee of clashing steel and desperate cries. But the initial momentum of Elmsworth's forces had been broken, their advantage blunted by the unexpected resistance. Sir Tristan, who had been fighting his way towards the gate, saw the shift in the battle. He rallied the remaining men-at-arms and, with a renewed push, managed to force the enemy soldiers back, temporarily securing the gate and preventing further reinforcements from entering. He saw Emmeline, fighting alongside Lord Beaumont, her pitchfork a surprisingly effective weapon in her hands. He felt a surge of admiration for her courage, her resilience, her unwavering determination. He had known she was strong, but he had not realized the depths of her inner fire. As the fighting continued, a new element entered the fray. A horn blew, a clear, resonant sound that cut through the din of battle. It was not the horn of Highgate, nor of Lord Elmsworth. It was a different signal, a new arrival. Both sides paused, momentarily uncertain of the horn's meaning. Then, from the south, a new force emerged, riding under a banner that Emmeline did not recognize, a silver wolf on a field of black. The new arrivals charged into the courtyard, not attacking Highgate's defenders, but engaging Lord Elmsworth's forces. The battle took another unexpected turn, the chaos intensifying as the three forces clashed. Lord Elmsworth, seeing his advantage slipping away, roared his fury, his face contorted with rage. He rallied his remaining men and charged towards the newcomers, determined to crush this new threat. The leader of the Silver Wolf banner, a tall, imposing knight clad in black armor, met Lord Elmsworth's charge head-on. Their swords clashed, a deafening clang that echoed across the courtyard. Emmeline watched, her heart pounding, unsure of who these new arrivals were, or what their intentions might be. Were they allies, or another enemy? Sir Tristan, seeing her confusion, moved to her side, his sword still dripping with blood. "I do not know them," he said, his voice grim. "But they fight against Elmsworth, and that is enough for now." The fighting continued, a brutal, three-way struggle for control of Highgate. The courtyard was a scene of carnage, the ground littered with the dead and dying. Emmeline, separated from Lord Beaumont in the chaos, found herself facing a new threat. Sir Reginald, the traitor, emerged from the shadows, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and malice. He was armed with a dagger, his intentions clear. You were supposed to be dead," he stammered, his voice trembling. "Elmsworth promised you many things, I imagine," Emmeline said, her voice cold. "But promises are easily broken, especially by traitors." She raised her pitchfork, ready to defend herself. But before she could strike, a figure intervened. Sir Tristan, moving with lightning speed, disarmed Sir Reginald with a swift, brutal motion, sending the dagger clattering to the ground. He grabbed Sir Reginald by the throat, his eyes blazing with fury. "You will pay for your treachery," he growled. But before he could deliver the killing blow, Emmeline stopped him. "No, Sir Tristan," she said, her voice firm. "Let him live. He will be more useful to us alive." Sir Tristan hesitated, his anger battling with his sense of reason. He looked at Emmeline, his eyes searching hers. He saw the strength in her gaze, the unwavering determination. He lowered his sword, reluctantly releasing Sir Reginald. "Take him prisoner," Emmeline ordered, her voice commanding. "He will answer for his crimes." Sir Tristan nodded, his respect for her growing with each passing moment. He sheathed his sword and signaled to two of his men-at-arms, who quickly bound Sir Reginald's hands and led him away. As the battle raged on, a subtle shift occurred between Emmeline and Sir Tristan. The shared danger, the mutual reliance, the unspoken understanding that had been building between them, intensified. They fought back to back, their movements synchronized, their instincts aligned. They were no longer just allies, they were partners, bound together by a shared purpose and a growing attraction. The knight in black armor, the leader of the Silver Wolf banner, continued to fight with exceptional skill and courage, gradually pushing Lord Elmsworth's forces back. He seemed to be seeking out Lord Elmsworth himself, his movements deliberate and purposeful. Finally, the two met in the center of the courtyard, their swords clashing in a furious duel. The fighting around them subsided, as both sides watched the outcome of this decisive confrontation. The knight in black armor was clearly the superior swordsman. He parried Lord Elmsworth's blows with ease, his movements fluid and graceful, his attacks precise and deadly. He gradually wore down Lord Elmsworth, disarming him with a swift, decisive maneuver. Lord Elmsworth, defeated and humiliated, fell to his knees, his sword lying useless on the ground. The knight in black armor stood over him, his sword pointed at Lord Elmsworth's throat. The courtyard was silent, every eye fixed on the two figures. The fate of Highgate, the outcome of the battle, hung in the balance. The knight in black armor lowered his sword. "I will not kill you, Elmsworth," he said, his voice deep and resonant, amplified by his helmet. "But you will answer for your crimes. You will face justice." He then turned and looked towards Emmeline. He removed his helmet, revealing a face that was both handsome and familiar. Emmeline gasped. It was Lord Ashford, the other nobleman implicated in Alara's letter, the man who had supposedly conspired with Lord Elmsworth to frame her mother. The dance of deception had reached its climax, and desire, amidst the chaos, found a moment to flicker to life, undeniable and dangerous, between Emmeline and the knight who had always been at her side. The man who just spared a traitor's life. Chapter 10. The Lion and the Dove. The revelation of Lord Ashford's identity sent a wave of confusion and disbelief through the assembled combatants. Lord Elmsworth, kneeling on the ground, stared at Ashford with a mixture of hatred and bewilderment. The soldiers of Highgate and Elmsworth's forces lowered their weapons, uncertain of what to make of this unexpected turn of events. Emmeline, equally stunned, looked at Sir Tristan, seeking an explanation. But he seemed as surprised as she was, his emerald eyes fixed on Ashford, his expression unreadable. Lord Ashford, ignoring the stunned silence, walked towards Emmeline, his gaze unwavering. He stopped before her, bowing slightly. "Lady Emmeline," he said, his voice deep and resonant, now free of the helmet's amplification. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but I believe it was necessary." "Lord Ashford," Emmeline replied, her voice hesitant. I do not understand. Your name was in the letter with Elmsworth's. You were accused of conspiring against my mother." Ashford nodded. "I was," he said, "but the accusations were false. A carefully constructed lie, designed to protect the true traitor." He turned and looked at Lord Beaumont, who was standing nearby, his face pale, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock and something else. "Recognition? Guilt?" "The true traitor," Ashford said, his voice rising in volume, "is not Elmsworth. It is Lord Beaumont." The accusation hung in the air, a thunderbolt that shattered the fragile peace. Lord Beaumont recoiled as if struck, his face contorting in disbelief. This is madness," he stammered. "Ashford, you lie." "I do not lie, Beaumont," Ashford said, his voice cold and hard. "I have proof. Proof that you have hidden for years. Proof that will expose your treachery to the world." He reached into a pouch at his belt and produced a small, leather-bound book. "This," he said, "is Lord Alaric's journal. It contains his private thoughts, his suspicions, his growing awareness of the plot against him." He opened the book and began to read, his voice echoing across the courtyard. The journal entries spoke of Alaric's love for Alara, his trust in Beaumont, his growing unease about certain events, his suspicions about a conspiracy within his own household. The final entry, written shortly before Alaric's death, was damning. It spoke of Alaric's discovery of Beaumont's betrayal, his realization that Beaumont had been manipulating him, using him, plotting against him all along. It spoke of Alaric's intention to expose Beaumont, to bring him to justice. Emmeline listened, her heart breaking as she heard her father's words, his voice from beyond the grave, revealing the truth that had been hidden for so long. She looked at Lord Beaumont, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and disbelief. Lord Beaumont, unable to meet her gaze, crumbled under the weight of the evidence. He sank to his knees, his face buried in his hands. "It was for the good of the realm," he mumbled, his voice choked with emotion. Alaric was unstable. He was making dangerous alliances. He had to be stopped. "So you framed Alara," Ashford said, his voice laced with contempt. "You used her as a pawn. You destroyed her reputation. You drove her to her death. And you raised her daughter, in ignorance of her true heritage, to keep your secret safe." "I protected her," Beaumont protested, his voice weak. "I gave her a home, an education. You gave her a gilded cage," Ashford retorted. "You kept her a prisoner of your lies." Emmeline, overcome with emotion, stepped forward.
"Why?"
she asked, her voice trembling. "Why did you do it? Why did you betray my parents? Why did you keep the truth from me?" Lord Beaumont looked up at her, his eyes filled with tears. I believed I was doing the right thing, he said. I believed I was saving the realm from chaos. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. He looked at Emmeline, true sorrow etched on his features. I did care for you, Emmeline. In my own way. I saw you as a chance at redemption. A way to atone, somehow. The admission, while offering a sliver of understanding, did little to quell the turmoil within Emmeline. Sir Tristan, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, stepped forward. He looked at Lord Beaumont with a mixture of disgust and pity. You will answer for your crimes, Beaumont, he said, his voice cold. You will face the king's justice. He signaled to his men-at-arms, who took Lord Beaumont into custody. The former Lord of Highgate, stripped of his authority, his reputation shattered, was led away, a broken man. The courtyard was silent once more, the echoes of the battle fading away, replaced by a heavy sense of closure. The lion had fallen, the dove vindicated. But the victory was bittersweet, tinged with the pain of betrayal, the loss of innocence, the weight of a past that could never be fully erased. Ashford approached Emmeline again, his gaze softening. I am sorry, Lady Emmeline, that this truth had to be so brutally exposed, said Ashford. I am your uncle, your mother's brother. Emmeline stared at him, a mix of relief, grief, and questions. I have long sought to bring those to justice who hurt Alara, including Elmsworth, who did play a role, though secondary to Beaumont. It had to be this way, he finished quietly. And with that, she truly understood. The game, so long and carefully played, was finally done. And she had, finally, the family she had always wished for, and a future, though uncertain, laid bare before her. Chapter 11. Scars of Loyalty and Loss. The immediate aftermath of the battle was a blur of activity. The wounded were tended to, the dead were laid to rest, and the prisoners were secured. Lord Elmsworth, stripped of his titles and lands, was sent to the king's dungeons to await trial. Sir Reginald, the traitor, met a swift end, his treachery deemed too great to warrant mercy. Lord Beaumont, however, was a different matter. His betrayal had been deeper, more personal, more devastating. He was held in Highgate's own dungeons, awaiting the king's judgment. Emmeline, despite the pain he had caused her, could not bring herself to hate him. He had raised her, protected her, albeit for his own twisted reasons. She visited him in his cell, seeking answers, understanding, closure. Why, Lord Beaumont? She asked, her voice filled with a mixture of sorrow and confusion. Why did you do it? Why did you betray my parents? Why did you lie to me all these years? Lord Beaumont, sitting on a straw pallet, his face haggard and drawn, looked up at her. He had aged years in the past few days, the weight of his guilt crushing him. I told myself it was for the good of the realm, he said, his voice hoarse. I believed Alaric was unstable, a threat to the kingdom. I believed I was doing the right thing. But my mother, Emmeline said, her voice catching in her throat. She was innocent. She loved Alaric. She would never have betrayed him. I know that now, Beaumont said, his eyes filled with tears. I was blinded by my ambition, by my fear. I convinced myself that she was a part of the plot, that she was a danger. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. And me? Emmeline asked. Why did you keep me? Why did you raise me as your ward? You were a reminder, Beaumont said, his voice barely a whisper. A reminder of my sin. A chance to atone in some small way. I wanted to protect you, to give you a good life, even if it was built on a lie. A lie that has now been exposed, Emmeline said, her voice firm. A lie that has cost you everything. I deserve it, Beaumont said, his voice devoid of self-pity. I deserve whatever punishment the king sees fit. I have betrayed my oath, my honor, my daughter. The word daughter hung in the air, a painful reminder of the twisted relationship they had shared. Emmeline felt a pang of sympathy for him, despite everything. He was a broken man, a victim of his own ambition, his own flaws. I cannot forgive you, Lord Beaumont, she said, her voice soft but firm. But I understand. I understand the choices you made, even if I cannot condone them. She left him then, leaving him to his guilt, his regrets, his impending judgment. She knew that she would never fully understand his motivations, that the scars of his betrayal would always remain. But she had found a measure of closure, a sense of peace in confronting him, in hearing his confession. In the days that followed, Highgate began to heal. The damage from the battle was repaired, the defenses were strengthened, and a new sense of order emerged. Emmeline, with the support of Lord Ashford and Sir Tristan, took on the responsibilities of her birthright, becoming the Lady of Highgate in truth, not just in name. She proved to be a capable and compassionate leader, earning the respect and loyalty of the people. She implemented reforms, dispensed justice fairly, and worked to heal the divisions that had plagued Highgate for so long. Sir Tristan remained by her side, his loyalty unwavering, his support invaluable. He helped her navigate the complexities of courtly life, advised her on matters of strategy and defense, and protected her from those who would seek to exploit her newfound position. The bond between them, forged in the crucible of battle and betrayal, deepened with each passing day. They shared a mutual respect, a growing affection, an unspoken understanding that transcended words. They spent hours together, riding through the hills, discussing plans for Highgate's future, sharing stories of their past. Emmeline found herself increasingly drawn to him, to his strength, his integrity, his quiet compassion. She saw the scars he carried, the wounds of past battles, the burden of his oath. She saw the loneliness in his eyes, the yearning for connection, for a love that had eluded him for so long. One evening, as they stood on the battlements, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, she finally voiced the question that had been haunting her. "Sir Tristan," she said, her voice soft, "why did you do it? Why did you risk everything to help me, a stranger, a woman you barely knew?" He turned to her, his emerald eyes meeting hers. He smiled, a slow, gentle smile that reached the depths of his soul. "I told you," he said, his voice low and earnest. "It was a matter of honor, a debt to my father, a promise to your mother." "But it was more than that, wasn't it?" she asked, her gaze unwavering. There was something else. He hesitated for a moment, his smile fading, replaced by a look of vulnerability, of uncertainty. "Yes," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "There was something else. From the moment I saw you, standing in the great hall, I knew that you were different, that you were someone special." "And now?" she asked, her heart pounding in her chest. "What do you see now?" He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek. His touch sent a shiver through her, a wave of warmth that spread through her entire being. "I see a woman of courage," he began, his voice thick with emotion.
"Of strength.
Of compassion. A woman who has overcome adversity, who has embraced her destiny, who has captured my heart." The words hung in the air, a confession, a declaration, a promise. The scars of loyalty and loss were still there, but amidst them, a new hope, a new love, was beginning to blossom. Chapter 12. The Unveiling of Truth. The confession on the battlements hung between them, unspoken yet undeniable. The air crackled with a tension that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Emmeline, her heart soaring, found herself caught between the joy of his words and the fear of the unknown future. The following days were filled with a new kind of awareness. Every glance, every touch, every shared word was imbued with a deeper meaning, a silent acknowledgement of the growing bond between them. They continued to work together, managing the affairs of Highgate, preparing for the king's visit, solidifying their position. But beneath the surface of their daily routines, a current of unspoken desire flowed, a constant reminder of the feelings they had confessed. Lord Ashford, now revealed as Emmeline's uncle, proved to be a valuable ally and a source of wise counsel. He explained the intricacies of his long game, how he had carefully maneuvered himself into a position of trust with both Lord Elmsworth and Lord Beaumont, all the while gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to strike. It was a dangerous game, Emmeline, he said, his voice filled with a mixture of regret and satisfaction. But it was the only way. I had to protect you, to ensure your birthright, to avenge your mother's death. You risked your life, uncle, Emmeline said, her voice filled with gratitude. You could have been exposed at any moment. It was a risk I was willing to take, Ashford replied. Alara was my sister. I loved her dearly. And I saw in you, her daughter, a chance to right the wrongs of the past, to build a better future. He also shed light on Sir Tristan's family, the de Veras, and their long-standing connection to the Beaumonts and, secretly, to his own lineage, the Ashfords. Generations of intertwined loyalties, rivalries, and secrets had shaped the events that had unfolded. The de Veras have always been honorable men, Ashford said. Sir Tristan's father, Sir Gareth, was a true knight, loyal to Alaric, loyal to the truth. He instilled those values in his son. I know, Emmeline said, her voice soft. I see it in him every day. The king's visit was imminent, a formal acknowledgement of Emmeline's claim to Highgate and a judgment on Lord Beaumont. The preparations were extensive, the castle bustling with activity. Emmeline, despite her growing confidence, felt a sense of trepidation. She was about to face the ultimate test, the scrutiny of the realm, the judgment of the king. Sir Tristan, sensing her anxiety, sought her out. He found her in the Falcon Mews, her usual sanctuary, stroking Shadow's feathers, her gaze lost in thought. You are troubled, my lady, he said, his voice gentle. She turned, offering him a small, strained smile. I am apprehensive, she admitted. The king's visit, it is a daunting prospect. I am not sure I am ready. You are ready, Emmeline, he said, his voice firm. You have proven yourself, time and again. You are strong. You are capable. You are the rightful lady of Highgate. But what if he doubts me? She asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. What if he questions my claim, my loyalty? He will not, Sir Tristan said, his eyes filled with conviction. I will stand by your side. Lord Ashford will stand by your side. We will present the evidence, we will tell the truth, and he will see that justice is done. His words offered her comfort, a reassurance that she was not alone. But there was something else, something unspoken, that lingered between them. The confession on the battlements, the undeniable attraction, the growing love that neither of them had dared to fully acknowledge. Tristan, she said, her voice hesitant. About what you said the other night, he met her gaze, his emerald eyes filled with a mixture of tenderness and vulnerability. I meant every word, Emmeline, he said. I have come to care for you, deeply. And she began, then hesitated, her fear battling with her desire. I care for you too, Tristan. More than I ever thought possible. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her face. His touch sent a wave of warmth through her, a spark of electricity that ignited the unspoken desire between them. But, she continued, her voice trembling slightly, we are from different worlds. You are a knight, sworn to the king. I am the Lady of Highgate, with responsibilities, obligations. Those obligations do not negate what is between us. Emmeline, he said, his voice low and earnest. They may complicate matters, but they do not diminish the truth of our feelings. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin. I know that the future is uncertain, he said, that there may be obstacles, challenges that we will have to face. But I am willing to face them, with you, by my side. His lips brushed against hers, a tentative, fleeting touch that sent a shiver down her spine. It was a kiss of promise, of hope, of a love that was beginning to blossom, despite the uncertainties that surrounded them. The unveiling of truth had brought them to this moment, a precipice of possibility and peril. The king's judgment awaited, but a different, more personal truth had been revealed, a truth that would bind them together, whatever the future might hold. Chapter 13. Trials by Fire and Faith. The arrival of King Alaric II, named, ironically, after Emmeline's father, though of a different branch of the royal line, was heralded by trumpets and the thunder of hooves. The courtyard of Highgate, still bearing faint scars of the recent battle, was transformed into a scene of regal pageantry. Banners bearing the royal crest, a golden lion on a field of crimson, snapped in the wind, and the assembled crowd, a mix of Highgate's residents, Lord Ashford's men, and the king's retinue, held their breath in anticipation. Emmeline, dressed in a gown of deep blue velvet, embroidered with silver falcons, stood beside Sir Tristan and Lord Ashford, awaiting the king's approach. She felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of all that had transpired, the final test of her claim. King Alaric II was a young man, barely older than Emmeline, with a keen, intelligent gaze and an air of regal authority. He dismounted his horse, his movements graceful and deliberate, and approached the waiting group. "Lady Emmeline," he said, his voice clear and resonant. "We have heard much of you, and of the events that have unfolded at Highgate." He looked at Lord Ashford, his expression unreadable. "Lord Ashford, you have presented compelling evidence. Evidence that implicates Lord Beaumont in grave crimes. The evidence is irrefutable, Your Majesty," Ashford replied, his voice firm. "Lord Beaumont himself has confessed." The king then turned his gaze to Sir Tristan. "And you, Sir Tristan de Vere, have played a significant role in these events. Your loyalty to Lady Emmeline is commendable." "My loyalty is to the truth, Your Majesty," Sir Tristan replied, his voice unwavering. "And to the rightful heir of Highgate." The king finally looked at Emmeline, his eyes scrutinizing her face, searching for any sign of deception, of weakness. "Lady Emmeline," he said, his voice softening slightly, "you have been through much. You have lost much. But you have also shown great courage, great resilience. You have claimed your birthright, a birthright that was stolen from you." "I have, Your Majesty," Emmeline replied, her voice clear and steady. "And I intend to honor that birthright, to serve my people, to uphold the laws of the realm." The king nodded, his expression thoughtful. "We have heard testimony from all parties," he said. "We have reviewed the evidence, we have considered the claims, and we have reached a decision." The courtyard was silent, every eye fixed on the king. The fate of Highgate, the future of Emmeline, hung in the balance. "Lord Beaumont," the king announced, his voice ringing out across the courtyard, "is found guilty of treason, of conspiracy, of the murder of Alara. His crimes are unforgivable. His sentence is banishment. He will be stripped of his titles, his lands, and exiled from this realm, forever." A collective gasp arose from the crowd. Banishment was a harsh sentence, a fate worse than death for a man of Beaumont's standing. But it was also a merciful sentence, a recognition of his past service, his twisted motivations, his eventual confession. The king then turned to Emmeline. "Lady Emmeline," he said, his voice filled with authority and compassion, "we recognize your claim to Highgate. We acknowledge your birthright, your lineage, your courage. We declare you the rightful Lady of Highgate, with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities that entails." A cheer erupted from the crowd, a wave of relief and celebration that swept through the courtyard. Emmeline felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of gratitude, triumph, and a profound sense of responsibility. The king continued, "And, in recognition of your service to the realm," he said, "and as a symbol of our trust and favor, we bestow upon you the title of Countess of Highgate." Another cheer, louder than the first, echoed across the courtyard. Emmeline, now Countess of Highgate, felt a weight settle upon her shoulders, the weight of her new title, her new responsibilities, her new destiny. The king then addressed Sir Tristan. "Sir Tristan de Vere," he said, "your loyalty and bravery have been exemplary. You have served Lady Emmeline and the realm with distinction. In recognition of your service, we grant you the lands and title of Baron of Westbrook, a holding adjacent to Highgate." Sir Tristan bowed, his face expressing his gratitude and surprise. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said. "I am honored." The king smiled. "We believe," he said, his voice laced with a hint of amusement, "that this arrangement will strengthen the bonds between Highgate and Westbrook, and, perhaps, foster a fruitful alliance. His gaze drifted between Emmeline and Sir Tristan, a knowing look in his eyes. The trials by fire had tested their loyalty, their courage, their love. The trials of faith, the acceptance of their feelings, of their different stations, were just beginning. But for now, in the courtyard of Highgate, under the king's approving gaze, a new chapter had begun. Chapter 14. A kingdom divided, a heart torn. The king's pronouncements solidified Emmeline's position and rewarded Tristan's loyalty, but they also cast a long shadow. The elevation of a falconer's daughter, even one with proven noble lineage, to countess, and the granting of a barony to a knight known for his directness rather than his diplomacy, ruffled feathers among the established nobility. Whispers of discontent, fueled by envy and suspicion, began to circulate in the court. Emmeline, aware of the precariousness of her position, worked tirelessly to consolidate her power and earn the respect of her peers. She proved to be a shrewd and capable ruler, managing Highgate's affairs with a wisdom that belied her years. She implemented reforms, improved the lives of her people, and strengthened the defenses of her lands. Lord Ashford, her uncle, remained a trusted advisor, guiding her through the treacherous waters of courtly politics. He warned her of the dangers that lurked, of the jealousies and rivalries that could undermine her authority. "You have made enemies, Emmeline," he said, his voice grave. "Powerful enemies, who resent your rise, who question your legitimacy." "I know, uncle," she replied, her voice firm, "but I will not be intimidated. I will rule justly and wisely, and I will defend my birthright." Sir Tristan, now Baron of Westbrook, was a constant source of support and strength. He oversaw the training of Highgate's garrison, strengthened the fortifications of his own holding, and worked to forge alliances with neighboring lords. But their relationship, though strong, was also a source of tension. The kiss they had shared, the unspoken declaration of love, hung between them, a constant reminder of the feelings they harbored, feelings that were complicated by their different stations and the political realities of their world. Emmeline knew that a marriage alliance would be expected of her, a strategic union to strengthen her position and secure her lineage. She received numerous proposals from powerful lords eager to align themselves with Highgate. But her heart belonged to Tristan, a man who, despite his new title, was still considered beneath her in the rigid hierarchy of the realm. Tristan, too, was aware of the constraints. He knew that a marriage between them would be met with resistance, that it could destabilize Emmeline's position and undermine her authority. He loved her deeply, but he was also fiercely protective of her, unwilling to do anything that might harm her. One evening, as they walked along the battlements, the topic finally surfaced. "Emmeline," Tristan said, his voice hesitant, we need to talk about us." She turned to him, her heart pounding. "I know, Tristan," she said, her voice soft. "I have been avoiding it, I confess." "We cannot avoid it any longer," he said. "The pressure is mounting. You are receiving proposals you are expected to marry." "And you?" she asked, her gaze searching his. "What do you expect?" He sighed, his eyes filled with a mixture of longing and resignation. "I expect nothing, Emmeline," he said. "I love you. I will always love you. But I will not stand in the way of your duty, of your destiny." "My duty?" she said, her voice tinged with bitterness. "Is my duty to marry for power, for position, to sacrifice my own happiness for the sake of Highgate?" "It is not that simple, Emmeline," he said. "Your happiness matters. But so does the stability of your realm, the well-being of your people." "And what if my happiness lies with you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What if my heart belongs to you, and only you?" He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek. His touch sent a familiar shiver through her, a wave of warmth that momentarily dispelled the chill of the evening air. Then he began, his voice thick with emotion. "Then I would fight for you, Emmeline. I would defy the world. I would risk everything to be with you." But even as he spoke the words, they both knew the reality. The kingdom was divided, whispers of rebellion growing louder, fueled by those who resented Emmeline's rise and questioned her legitimacy. A marriage between them, a love match that defied convention, could be the spark that ignited a civil war. A messenger arrived, interrupting their tense conversation. He brought news from the capital, news that changed everything. The king, the messenger said, his voice breathless, has been challenged. A faction of nobles, led by Lord Elmsworth's brother, has risen in rebellion. They claim the king is weak, that he has favored upstarts, and they demand his abdication. The news hit them like a physical blow. The kingdom was on the brink of war, and Emmeline, as a newly appointed countess, a symbol of the king's favor, was a prime target. "We must prepare," Tristan said, his voice grim. "Highgate will be a strategic stronghold. We must defend it at all costs." Emmeline nodded, her mind racing. The personal conflict, the torn heart had to be set aside. The kingdom was divided, and her duty, her loyalty to the king, her responsibility to her people, came first. The dream of a life with Tristan, for now, had to remain just that, a dream. Chapter 15. Whispers in the Cloister. The rebellion spread like wildfire, engulfing the kingdom in chaos. Lord Elmsworth's brother, a charismatic and ruthless nobleman named Baron Morian, proved to be a formidable opponent. He rallied support from disaffected nobles, from those who resented the king's reforms and Emmeline's elevation, and from those who simply sought power and profit in the ensuing turmoil. Highgate, strategically located and well defended, became a key stronghold for the loyalist forces. Emmeline, with the support of Sir Tristan and Lord Ashford, prepared for a siege, strengthening the fortifications, training the garrison, and stockpiling supplies. But the threat came not only from without but also from within. Whispers of dissent, of treachery, circulated within Highgate's walls. Some, loyal to the old order, questioned Emmeline's authority, her legitimacy, her ability to lead in a time of war. Emmeline, aware of the internal divisions, sought solace and guidance in an unexpected place, the cloister of St. Agnes, a small, secluded monastery located within Highgate's outer walls. The monastery, dedicated to prayer and contemplation, had always been a place of refuge for her, a sanctuary from the pressures of courtly life. The abbess of St. Agnes, Mother Alara, a namesake, not a relation, though the coincidence had always struck Emmeline as significant, was a wise and compassionate woman, known for her piety and her keen insight into human nature. Emmeline had often sought her counsel in the past, and now, facing the greatest challenge of her life, she turned to her once more. "Mother Alara," Emmeline said, her voice troubled, as they sat together in the quiet of the cloister garden. I fear for Highgate, for my people, for the future." The abbess, her face lined with age but her eyes filled with a serene wisdom, listened patiently. "Fear is a natural companion to courage, my child," she said, her voice gentle. "It is not the absence of fear that defines us, but how we choose to face it." "But the kingdom is divided," Emmeline said. "There is rebellion, treachery, whispers of dissent even within my own walls." "The world is always divided, my child," the abbess replied. "Between light and darkness, between good and evil, between love and hate. It is the choices we make, the paths we choose, that determine the outcome." "I have made difficult choices," Emmeline said. "Choices that have made me enemies, choices that have put my people at risk. And choices that have saved lives, my child," the abbess added. "Choices made from a position of strength, not weakness. Remember that." And Emmeline hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. "Choices that have separated me from the one I love." The abbess nodded, her gaze understanding. "Love is a powerful force, my child," she said. "But it is not always a simple one. It can bring great joy, but also great pain. It can be a source of strength, but also a source of vulnerability." "I know," Emmeline said, her voice filled with sorrow. "I know that my duty, my responsibility, must come first. But it tears at my heart." "Your heart is torn, my child," the abbess said, "because you are being asked to choose between two great loves, the love for a man and the love for your people. It is a choice that no one should have to make, but it is a choice that many rulers, many leaders have faced throughout history." "What should I do, Mother Alara?" Emmeline asked, her voice pleading. How can I reconcile these conflicting desires, these competing loyalties? The abbess smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. There is no easy answer, my child, she said. There is no magic formula, no simple solution. You must listen to your heart, to your conscience, to the wisdom that lies within you. You must pray for guidance, for strength, for the courage to make the right choices, even when those choices are difficult, even when they are painful. She paused, her gaze searching Emmeline's face. But know this, my child, she said. Love, true love, is never a weakness. It is a source of strength, a source of resilience, a source of hope. And even when it seems lost, even when it seems impossible, it can still endure, it can still guide us, it can still light our way. Emmeline left the cloister with a renewed sense of purpose, a clearer understanding of the challenges she faced, and a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. The whispers in the cloister had not provided easy answers, but they had offered solace, guidance, and the strength to carry on. The kingdom was divided, her heart was torn, but her spirit remained unbroken. The path ahead was uncertain, but she would walk it with courage, with faith, and with the enduring power of love, both for her people and for the knight who held her heart. Chapter 16. The Edge of the Abyss. The siege of Highgate began with a relentless barrage of catapults and trebuchets, hurling massive stones against the castle walls. The defenders, outnumbered but resolute, withstood the initial assault, returning fire with their own siege engines and raining down arrows and boiling oil upon the attackers. Sir Tristan, commanding the defenses, moved tirelessly along the battlements, encouraging the men, directing their fire and plugging any breaches in the walls. He knew that Highgate was a key strategic stronghold, and he was determined to capture it, no matter the cost. He offered Emmeline terms of surrender, promising to spare the lives of the defenders if she yielded the castle. Emmeline, torn between her duty to her people and her desire to resist the rebellion, refused his offer. She would not surrender, she would not betray the king, she would not abandon her birthright. The internal divisions within Highgate, however, continued to fester. A small faction, loyal to the old order, plotted to betray Emmeline and open the gates to Baron Morion. They believed that surrender was the only way to save their lives and preserve their positions. The plot was discovered, by chance, by one of Emmeline's loyal servants, a young woman who had overheard the conspirators' whispered conversations. She reported the plot to Emmeline, who immediately took action. The conspirators were arrested, their treachery exposed. Emmeline, faced with a difficult decision, chose to show mercy. She spared their lives, but banished them from Highgate, sending them into exile. Her act of clemency, however, was not universally praised. Some, including Sir Tristan, believed that she should have shown no mercy to traitors, that she should have made an example of them to deter any further dissent. They betrayed you, Emmeline, Tristan said, his voice troubled. They would have handed you over to Morion, they would have seen Highgate fall. I know, Tristan, she replied, her voice weary. But I could not bring myself to execute them. They were misguided, they were afraid, but they were also my people. Mercy is a virtue, Emmeline, he said. But in times of war, it can also be a weakness. It can be seen as a sign of indecision, of a lack of resolve.
Perhaps, she said.
But I believe that compassion, even in the face of adversity, is a strength, not a weakness. It is what separates us from the barbarians, from those who would rule through fear and violence. Their disagreement, though rooted in their shared concern for Highgate's safety, highlighted the growing tension between them, the strain of the siege, the unspoken longing that continued to simmer beneath the surface. As the siege reached its climax, a new threat emerged. Baron Morion, frustrated by Highgate's stubborn resistance, resorted to a desperate tactic. He ordered his engineers to dig a tunnel beneath the castle walls, intending to collapse a section of the fortifications and create a breach for his troops to storm through. The defenders discovered the tunneling operation just in time. Sir Tristan, leading a small force, ventured into the tunnel, engaging in a brutal, hand-to-hand combat with the enemy engineers. The fighting was fierce, the tunnel dark and claustrophobic. Sir Tristan, despite his skill and courage, was wounded, a deep gash in his side. He managed to kill the lead engineer and collapse a section of the tunnel, preventing the enemy from completing their work, but he was badly injured. He was carried back to the castle, unconscious and bleeding profusely. Emmeline, upon seeing his condition, was overcome with fear and despair. She rushed to his side, tending to his wound, her hands trembling. "Tristan," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Please, please don't leave me." The edge of the abyss loomed, not just for Highgate, but for Emmeline's heart. The siege had reached its breaking point, and the fate of the castle and the man she loved hung precariously in the balance. Chapter 17. A bond forged in shadows. Tristan hovered between life and death. Emmeline, refusing to leave his side, tended to his wound with a desperate urgency, her knowledge of herbs and healing, learned from her father and the abbess, proving invaluable. She prayed, she pleaded, she bargained with any power that might listen, for his life. The castle's physician, an elderly man named Master Gareth, another echo of the past, though unrelated to Tristan's father, did what he could, but the wound was deep, and infection was a serious threat. "He is strong, my lady," Master Gareth said, his voice grave. "But he has lost much blood. His fate is uncertain." Emmeline refused to accept that uncertainty. She stayed by Tristan's bedside day and night, watching over him, speaking to him, even though he remained unconscious. She told him stories of her childhood, of her father, of the falcons, of her dreams for Highgate. She confessed her love for him, her fears, her hopes, her regrets. "Please, Tristan," she whispered, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and grief. "You cannot leave me. I need you. I love you." On the third day, as the siege continued unabated, a glimmer of hope appeared. Tristan's fever broke, and he stirred, his eyelids fluttering. Emmeline, who had fallen into a fitful sleep beside his bed, awoke instantly. She saw his eyes open, his emerald gaze, though weak, focusing on her face. "Emmeline," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Tristan," she cried, her heart soaring with relief. "You're awake. You're alive." He smiled, a weak, fleeting smile that nevertheless lit up his face. Did not leave you," he murmured. Tears streamed down Emmeline's face, tears of joy, of relief, of gratitude. She held his hand, her grip tight, as if afraid he might disappear. "You fought so bravely," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You saved Highgate. You saved us all." "The tunnel?" he asked, his voice still weak. "Collapsed," she replied. "You stopped them. You prevented them from breaching the walls." He closed his eyes, a sigh of relief escaping his lips. He drifted in and out of consciousness, his strength slowly returning. Emmeline continued to tend to him, feeding him broth, changing his bandages, keeping him warm. She spoke to him of the ongoing siege, of the courage of the defenders, of the dwindling supplies, of the desperate need for reinforcements. "The king," Tristan whispered, his eyes flickering open. "Has he sent aid?" Emmeline hesitated. She had received no word from the king, no sign of any relief force. She knew that Highgate was on its own, that they were facing overwhelming odds. But she could not bring herself to tell Tristan the truth, to crush his fragile hope. He is gathering his forces," she said, her voice faltering slightly. "He will come. He will not abandon us." Tristan, weakened as he was, seemed to sense her deception. He looked at her, his emerald eyes filled with a knowing sadness. "Do not lie to me, Emmeline," he whispered. "I can handle the truth," she sighed, her shoulders slumping. She could not lie to him. Not now, not ever. "There has been no word," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "We are alone." He nodded, his eyes closing again. He seemed to accept the news with a quiet resignation, a weary acceptance of their fate. But Emmeline refused to give up. She had seen Tristan survive a near-fatal wound. She had witnessed the courage of the defenders. She had felt the enduring power of love and loyalty. She would not surrender. She would not abandon hope. She left Tristan's bedside for the first time in days and sought out Lord Ashford. She found him in the war room, poring over maps, his face grim. "Uncle," she said, her voice firm, "we need a plan. We cannot simply wait for the inevitable. We must find a way to break the siege, to reach out for help, to turn the tide." Ashford looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and concern. "We are surrounded, Emmeline," he said. "Outnumbered. Out of time. There must be something we can do," she insisted. "Some way to surprise them, to disrupt their plans, to create an opening." She thought of the secret passages, of the Falcon Muse, of the skills her father had taught her. An idea began to form in her mind, a daring, desperate plan that could, just possibly, give them a chance. "The Falcons," she said, her voice gaining strength. "We can use the Falcons." Ashford looked at her, his eyebrows raised in surprise. "The Falcons?
How?"
She explained her plan, her voice filled with a newfound determination. It was a long shot, a risky gamble, but it was their only hope. The bond forged in shadows, the love between Emmeline and Tristan, had given her the strength to fight on, to devise a plan, to face the seemingly impossible odds. The siege was far from over, but a new spark of hope, carried on the wings of falcons, had been ignited. Chapter 18. The Reckoning of Oaths. Emmeline's plan was audacious, bordering on reckless. It involved using Highgate's trained falcons to carry messages to potential allies, bypassing the besieging forces and appealing for reinforcements. The success of the plan hinged on the falcons' speed and agility, the secrecy of the operation, and the willingness of the recipients to respond. The most promising target was Lord Markham, a powerful nobleman whose lands bordered Highgate's and who had remained neutral in the conflict so far. He was known to be ambitious and opportunistic, and Emmeline hoped that the prospect of gaining favor with the king and potentially acquiring some of Lord Elmsworth's forfeited lands might sway him to their side. The messages, written on thin strips of parchment and attached to the falcon's legs, were carefully crafted, appealing to Lord Markham's self-interest, while also emphasizing the plight of Highgate and the threat posed by Baron Morian's rebellion. Emmeline, with the help of her father's former assistant, a young man named Peter, who had inherited his skills in falconry, prepared the birds for their mission. Shadow, her father's gerfalcon, was chosen to carry the most important message, the one addressed to Lord Markham himself. As she released Shadow into the night sky, she whispered a prayer, her heart filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The falcon soared upwards, disappearing into the darkness, carrying the fate of Highgate on its wings. Other falcons, carrying messages to less powerful but potentially sympathetic lords, were released in quick succession. The operation was carried out in complete secrecy, only a handful of trusted individuals aware of the plan. The waiting was agonizing. Days turned into nights, and still, there was no word from Lord Markham or any of the other nobles. The siege continued, the defenders growing weaker, their supplies dwindling. Tristan, slowly recovering from his wound, was restless and frustrated. He knew that Highgate could not hold out much longer, that their situation was desperate. "We should have sallied forth," he said, his voice strained. "We should have attacked them, disrupted their siege lines, bought ourselves some time." "We are too weak," Tristan, Emmeline replied, her voice weary. "A sally would be suicidal. We would be slaughtered. Then we die fighting," he said, his eyes flashing with his characteristic fire. "We do not simply wait for the inevitable. We are not waiting, Tristan," she said, her voice firm. "We have sent for help. We have a plan." She told him about the falcons, about the messages, about her hope that Lord Markham might intervene. Tristan, initially skeptical, listened intently. He saw the determination in her eyes, the unwavering belief in her plan. He knew that she would not give up, that she would fight to the very end. "It is a long shot, Emmeline," he said, his voice softening. "But it is a chance, and we must take every chance we can." He reached out, his hand covering hers. Their fingers intertwined, a silent acknowledgement of their bond, their love, their shared hope. On the 5th day after the falcons were released, a horn blew, a signal from the watchtower. A rider was approaching Highgate, bearing a banner, a white stag on a field of green. Lord Markham's colors. Emmeline and Tristan rushed to the battlements, their hearts pounding with anticipation. The rider was escorted through the gates and brought before them. "My lady," the rider said, bowing deeply, "I bring greetings from Lord Markham. He has received your message, and he is coming." Relief washed over Emmeline, a wave of emotion that almost brought her to her knees. Markham was coming. They were not alone. The rider continued, "Lord Markham has gathered his forces. He is marching on Highgate. He intends to break the siege and crush the rebellion." A cheer erupted from the defenders, a roar of triumph that echoed across the castle walls. Hope so long deferred had finally arrived, but the reckoning of oaths was not yet complete. Lord Markham, while an ally, was also an ambitious and unpredictable man. His arrival would change the dynamics of the conflict, and his motives were not entirely clear. As Lord Markham's forces approached, Baron Morion, realizing that he was about to be caught between two armies, made a desperate gamble. He launched a final, all-out assault on Highgate, hoping to breach the walls before Markham could arrive. The battle that ensued was the fiercest yet. The defenders, fueled by the hope of relief, fought with a renewed vigor, but they were exhausted and outnumbered. The attackers, driven by desperation, fought with a savage intensity. Emmeline, despite the danger, remained on the battlements, inspiring the defenders, directing their fire, and tending to the wounded. She saw Tristan, his wound still healing, fighting with a courage that defied his weakened state. The fighting raged for hours, the outcome hanging precariously in the balance. Just as it seemed that Highgate's defenses would finally collapse, Lord Markham's army arrived, charging into the fray with a thunder of hooves and a roar of battle cries. The besieging forces, caught between two armies, were routed. Baron Morion, attempting to rally his men, was unhorsed and captured. The rebellion, at least in this part of the kingdom, was crushed. The siege of Highgate was lifted. The reckoning of oaths, both of loyalty and of betrayal, had been delivered. But the cost had been high, and the future remained uncertain. A new chapter, however, was about to begin. Chapter 19. Dawn of a New Allegiance. The relief of Highgate was met with jubilation. The defenders, exhausted but triumphant, cheered Lord Markham's arrival, their spirits soaring after weeks of relentless siege. The wounded were tended to, the dead were mourned, and the prisoners were secured. Baron Morion, captured and brought before Emmeline, was defiant to the last. He spat at her feet, cursing her name, vowing revenge. "You may have won this battle, Countess," he sneered, "but the war is far from over. The king is weak, his reign is crumbling, and you will fall with him." Emmeline, unmoved by his threats, looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. "Your rebellion is crushed, Morion," she said, her voice cold. "Your ambition has brought you nothing but ruin. You will face the king's justice, and you will pay for your crimes." Morion was taken away, his curses echoing in the courtyard. Emmeline turned her attention to Lord Markham, who was standing nearby, his face flushed with victory. "Lord Markham," she said, her voice formal but grateful, "we owe you a debt that can never be repaid. You saved Highgate, you saved my people, you saved me." Markham bowed, a slight smile playing on his lips. "It was my duty, Lady Emmeline," he said, "to aid a loyal subject of the king, to crush a rebellion that threatened the stability of the realm." But there was something in his eyes, a glint of ambition, a hint of calculation, that made Emmeline uneasy. She knew that Markham's motives were not entirely altruistic, that he had his own agenda, his own ambitions. "The king will be most grateful, Lord Markham," she said. "He will reward your loyalty, your service." "I seek no reward," Lady Emmeline Markham replied, his smile widening. "Beyond the satisfaction of serving my king, and perhaps strengthening the bonds between our houses." His gaze lingered on her, a subtle suggestion in his eyes. Emmeline understood his meaning. He was proposing an alliance, a marriage alliance, between Highgate and Markham. It was a tempting offer. Markham was a powerful lord, his lands extensive, his influence considerable. A marriage between them would strengthen Highgate's position, secure its borders, and provide a powerful ally in the ongoing conflict. But Emmeline's heart belonged to Tristan. She could not, would not, marry for political expediency, sacrificing her own happiness for the sake of power. She hesitated, her mind racing. She needed time to consider her options, time to consult with Tristan and Lord Ashford. "I thank you for your proposal, Lord Markham," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "It is a matter that requires careful consideration. I will give you my answer soon." Markham bowed again, his expression unreadable. He knew that he had made his intentions clear, and he was willing to wait for now. Emmeline sought out Tristan, finding him in the infirmary, his wound being tended to by Master Gareth. He looked pale and exhausted, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "Emmeline," he said, his voice weak, but filled with relief. "You are safe. Highgate is safe." "Yes, Tristan," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Thanks to you, thanks to the courage of the defenders, and thanks to Lord Markham." She told him about Markham's arrival, about the defeat of Maureen's forces, about Markham's proposal. Tristan listened in silence, his face growing grim. He knew the implications of Markham's offer, the political advantages, the strategic benefits. He also knew that it would mean the end of any hope for a future with Emmeline. "He is a powerful lord, Emmeline," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "A marriage to him would secure your position. But it would also break my heart," she said, her voice filled with anguish. "I love you, Tristan. I cannot marry another." He reached out, his hand gently cupping her face. His touch sent a familiar shiver through her, a wave of warmth that momentarily dispelled the chill of the infirmary. "I love you too, Emmeline," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "More than life itself. But I will not stand in the way of your duty, of your destiny." "My destiny is not to be a pawn in a political game," she said, her voice firm. "My destiny is to rule Highgate, to protect my people, and to choose my own path." She told him of her plan, a daring, unconventional plan that could change everything. It was a risky gamble, but it was the only way she could see to reconcile her duty with her heart. Tristan listened, his initial skepticism giving way to a growing admiration for her courage, her ingenuity, her unwavering determination. "It is a bold plan, Emmeline," he said, "and a dangerous one. But I believe in you. I will support you, whatever you decide." The dawn of a new allegiance was breaking, not just between Highgate and a potential ally, but between Emmeline and Tristan. They had faced death together. They had fought for their love and their loyalty, and now they were ready to forge a new path, a path that defied convention, a path that honored their hearts. Chapter 20. The Falcon and the Knight. Emmeline's plan was to appeal directly to the king, to present him with a fait accompli, a situation that would force him to accept her decision and bless her union with Tristan. She would travel to the capital, accompanied by Lord Ashford and a small retinue, and present herself to the king, not as a supplicant, but as a victorious countess who had crushed a rebellion and secured a vital stronghold for the loyalist cause. She would also bring with her Lord Markham, not as a potential suitor, but as a pledged ally, bound to Highgate by a treaty of mutual defense and cooperation, a treaty that would strengthen the king's position and solidify his support in the region. The key to the plan was speed and secrecy. Emmeline knew that if word of her intentions reached her enemies at court, they would do everything in their power to thwart her. She had to act swiftly, decisively, before they could mobilize their opposition. She entrusted the defense of Highgate to Sir Tristan, now recovered from his wound, and to the loyal garrison, who had proven their courage and resilience during the siege. She knew that she could rely on them to protect Highgate in her absence. The journey to the capital was fraught with danger. The kingdom was still in turmoil, with pockets of rebellion flaring up in various regions. Emmeline and her party traveled in disguise, avoiding major roads and relying on secret routes known only to Lord Ashford. They finally reached the capital, a city scarred by the recent unrest, its streets patrolled by armed guards, its atmosphere tense and uncertain. Emmeline, disguised as a simple merchant woman, made her way to the royal palace, accompanied by Lord Ashford, who used his connections to gain them an audience with the king. King Alaric II, weary and burdened by the weight of the rebellion, was surprised to see Emmeline and Ashford. He had received reports of Highgate's victory, but he had not expected them to appear in person. "Lady Emmeline," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and curiosity. "Lord Ashford, this is unexpected. What brings you to the capital?" Emmeline stepped forward, shedding her disguise, revealing her true identity. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice clear and strong, "I have come to report on the victory at Highgate, to present to you the captured rebel leader, Baron Morian, and to seek your blessing." The king listened intently as Emmeline recounted the events of the siege, the courage of the defenders, the crucial role played by Sir Tristan, and the timely arrival of Lord Markham. He was impressed by her leadership, her resilience, her unwavering loyalty. Then, Emmeline presented her masterstroke. She introduced Lord Markham, not as a potential suitor, but as a pledged ally, bound to Highgate by a formal treaty. She explained the terms of the treaty, emphasizing the mutual benefits, the strengthened defenses, the unified front against any future rebellion. The king was taken aback. He had expected Emmeline to seek a marriage alliance, to strengthen her position through a strategic union. He had not anticipated this bold move, this independent decision that defied convention. Finally, Emmeline revealed her heart. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "I have pledged my loyalty to you, to the realm. I have fought for my birthright for my people. And I have found love. A love that is true, that is strong, that is unconventional." She looked at Tristan, who had remained silent throughout the audience. He stepped forward, meeting her gaze, his eyes filled with a love that transcended words. "I love Sir Tristan de Vere, Your Majesty," Emmeline said, her voice unwavering. "And he loves me. We wish to marry, with your blessing." The king was silent for a long moment, his gaze shifting between Emmeline and Tristan. He saw the love in their eyes, the strength of their bond, the courage of their conviction. He also saw the political implications, the potential backlash from the traditionalist nobles who would oppose such a union. But he also saw something else. He saw a new generation, a generation that was not afraid to challenge convention, to forge their own path, to build a better future. He saw a countess who had earned her title, a knight who had proven his loyalty, and a love that could be a symbol of hope in a divided kingdom. He smiled a slow, approving smile. "Lady Emmeline," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "Sir Tristan, you have my blessing. Your love is a beacon of hope in these troubled times. May your union be blessed, may it bring strength to Highgate, and may it inspire others to follow their hearts." Emmeline and Tristan knelt before the king, their hearts overflowing with gratitude. The falcon and the knight, united by love, by loyalty, by a shared destiny, had triumphed. The unconventional path had led them to their happiness, a happiness that would be tested, but never broken. The king, in a final act, announced their betrothal to the court, silencing any immediate dissent. The falcon and the knight would be wed, and a new era for Highgate, and perhaps the kingdom, had begun. Epilogue. The wedding of Emmeline, Countess of Highgate, and Sir Tristan de Vere, Baron of Westbrook, was a celebration of love, loyalty, and a new beginning. It was held in the courtyard of Highgate, the same place where they had faced battle and betrayal, now transformed into a scene of joy and festivity. The people of Highgate, who had witnessed their courage and resilience, cheered them with a heartfelt enthusiasm. Lord Ashford, his long game finally fulfilled, stood proudly beside his niece, a rare smile gracing his usually stern features. Lord Markham, his ambitions thwarted but his position secured, offered his congratulations with a graciousness that surprised even himself. Emmeline, radiant in a gown of white silk, embroidered with silver falcons and emeralds, looked every bit the countess she had become. But beneath the regal attire, she was still the falconer's daughter, the woman who had found her strength in adversity, her love in the midst of chaos. Tristan, standing tall and proud in his finest attire, his emerald eyes shining with love and devotion, was every inch the knight he had always been. But he was also the man who had found his home, his purpose, his heart, in the arms of the woman he loved. As they exchanged their vows, their voices clear and strong, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. They pledged their love, their loyalty, their lives to each other, promising to stand together through whatever challenges the future might bring. The ceremony concluded, and a cheer erupted, a wave of joy that echoed across the courtyard. The falcon and the knight, united at last, were a symbol of hope, a testament to the enduring power of love in a world often filled with darkness. The years that followed were not without their challenges. The kingdom remained divided, with sporadic outbreaks of rebellion and unrest. Emmeline and Tristan worked tirelessly to maintain peace and stability in their region, strengthening their defenses, forging alliances, and promoting justice and prosperity. They ruled Highgate together, their love a source of strength and guidance. Emmeline, with her wisdom and compassion, earned the respect and loyalty of her people. Tristan, with his courage and military skill, protected them from their enemies. They had children, a son and a daughter, who inherited their parents' best qualities, their courage, their intelligence, their unwavering commitment to justice. The children grew up in a Highgate that was both a fortress and a home, a place of strength and security, but also of love and laughter. Emmeline never forgot her roots, her connection to the falcons, to the wild, to the simple truths that had guided her through her life. She often visited the Falcon Mews, finding solace in the company of the birds, remembering her father, remembering the whispers of Highgate that had shaped her destiny. Tristan, too, never forgot the oath he had sworn, the debt he had repaid, the love he had found. He remained a knight, loyal to the king, loyal to Highgate, but above all, loyal to Emmeline. And so, the story of the falconer's daughter and the knight of the Emerald Crest came to an end. A story of courage, of loyalty, of betrayal, of redemption, and above all, of a love that defied convention, that overcame adversity, that triumphed in the end. A love that would be whispered through the halls of Highgate for generations to come. The end.